The year was 1983. A seemingly insignificant island nation in the Caribbean Sea became the focal point of a major international incident. This was the U.S. invasion of Grenada, a small island nation with a population of less than 100,000 people. The invasion, codenamed Operation Urgent Fury, was a swift and decisive military action. It toppled the island's Marxist government, raising numerous questions and controversies that continue to resonate today. Why did the United States, a global superpower, engage in such a forceful intervention in a tiny island nation? What were the real motives behind the invasion, and who ultimately benefited from the ensuing regime change? The official narrative, emphasizing the protection of American citizens and the restoration of democracy, has been met with skepticism by critics who point to Cold War anxieties and geopolitical interests as the true drivers of the invasion. Grenada, often referred to as the Spice Isle for its fragrant nutmeg and mace exports, has a long and tumultuous history marked by colonization, resistance, and the pursuit of self-determination. The island's first inhabitants, the indigenous Arawak people, were later displaced by the Carib Indians. European colonization began in the 17th century, with the French establishing a presence in 1650. Grenada changed hands between the French and British several times before becoming a British colony in 1783. The island's economy was heavily reliant on agriculture, particularly the production of sugarcane, which was cultivated using enslaved Africans. The abolition of slavery in 1834 ushered in a new era, but one still marked by economic hardship and social inequality. The quest for independence gained momentum in the 20th century, fueled by growing dissatisfaction with colonial rule and the rise of nationalist movements across the Caribbean. Eric Gary emerged as a prominent figure in Grenada's labor movement, advocating for workers' rights and self-governance. Amidst the growing disillusionment with Eric Gary's rule, a new political force emerged in Grenada, the New Jewel Movement, or NJM. Founded in 1973, the NJM was a leftist political party that advocated for social justice, economic equality, and a break from neo-colonialism. The party's charismatic leader, Maurice Bishop, captured the imagination of many Grenadians with his promises of a more just and equitable society. Bishop, a lawyer by training, was deeply influenced by Marxist ideology and the Cuban Revolution. He envisioned a Grenada free from foreign domination, where the wealth of the island would be distributed more fairly among its people. The NJM gained significant support, particularly among the youth, intellectuals, and marginalized communities who had grown weary of Gary's oppressive regime. In 1979, while Gary was out of the country, the NJM staged a bloodless coup d'etat, seizing control of the government and establishing the People's Revolutionary Government, or PRG. Bishop became prime minister, promising a new era of revolutionary transformation for Grenada. The rise of Maurice Bishop's leftist government in Grenada unfolded against the backdrop of the Cold War, a period of intense ideological rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union. The Caribbean, situated in close proximity to the U.S., became a focal point of this geopolitical chess game. The U.S. government, wary of the spread of communism in the region, viewed Bishop's alignment with Cuba with suspicion and concern. Cuba, under Fidel Castro's leadership, had become a close ally of the Soviet Union, providing both ideological inspiration and material support to leftist movements in Latin America and the Caribbean. Bishop's close ties with Cuba, which included accepting Cuban aid for infrastructure projects and welcoming Cuban military and civilian advisors, further fueled anxieties in Washington. The Reagan administration, pursuing a hardline anti-communist foreign policy, viewed Grenada as a potential Soviet outpost in the Caribbean, a threat to U.S. interests in the region. The construction of a new international airport in Grenada, financed with Cuban assistance, became a particular point of contention. The Reagan administration claimed that the airport, with its long runway capable of accommodating large aircraft, was not intended for civilian use, but rather for military purposes. Bishop's government vehemently denied these allegations, maintaining that the airport was essential for developing Grenada's tourism industry and boosting its economy. Despite the initial popularity of Maurice Bishop and the New Jewel movement, internal divisions within the government began to emerge. These divisions centered around ideological differences and the pace and direction of the revolution. Hardline factions within the PRG, led by Deputy Prime Minister Bernard Coard, criticized Bishop for what they perceived as his moderate stance and his willingness to compromise with Western powers. Coard and his supporters advocated for a more radical and orthodox Marxist-Leninist approach, pushing for closer ties with Cuba and the Soviet Union. They argued that Bishop's attempts to maintain dialogue with the United States and other capitalist countries were a betrayal of the revolution's principles and a threat to its long-term survival. The growing tensions within the PRG reached a boiling point in October 1983, when Bishop was placed under house arrest by Coard's faction. This internal coup sparked widespread protests and demonstrations across Grenada, as many Grenadians, who had initially supported Bishop and the revolution, opposed his removal from power. On October 19, 1983, Bishop and several of his loyalist ministers were executed by members of the People's Revolutionary Army, the military wing of the PRG. The execution of Maurice Bishop and the subsequent military takeover in Grenada sent shockwaves through the international community. The United States, already wary of the island's leftist government and its ties to Cuba, viewed these events with alarm, using them as justification for a military intervention. The Reagan administration, citing the need to protect American citizens living in Grenada, particularly the several hundred medical students studying at St. George's University, launched a full-scale invasion of the island on October 25, 1983. The invasion, code-named Operation Urgent Fury, involved thousands of U.S. troops, supported by naval and air power. The invasion force faced resistance from the Grenadian military, as well as Cuban military advisors and construction workers present on the island. However, the U.S. military's superior firepower and resources quickly overwhelmed the defending forces. The invasion of Grenada was met with mixed reactions internationally. Some countries, particularly those within the Caribbean region, criticized the intervention as a violation of Grenada's sovereignty and a dangerous precedent for future interventions in the region. Others, including some members of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, supported the U.S. action, arguing that it was necessary to restore order and protect foreign nationals. In the aftermath of the invasion, the U.S. military took control of Grenada, disarming the remaining Grenadian and Cuban forces. The Revolutionary Military Council was deposed, and a new government, headed by Governor-General Sir Paul Scoon, was installed. Scoon, a figurehead during Bishop's rule, had been appointed by Queen Elizabeth II, Grenada's head of state, as the island was a member of the Commonwealth of Nations. The U.S. government justified its intervention in Grenada on several grounds, arguing that it was necessary to protect American citizens, restore democracy, and prevent the island from becoming a Soviet-Cuban military base. The Reagan administration claimed that the invasion was supported by the OECS and that it was conducted at the request of Governor-General Scoon. However, critics argued that the invasion was illegal and motivated by Cold War paranoia and a desire to roll back leftist governments in the region. They pointed out that the safety of American citizens could have been ensured through diplomatic means, and that the invasion violated Grenada's sovereignty and set a dangerous precedent for future interventions. The U.S. invasion of Grenada remains a controversial event, marked by lingering questions and a shroud of secrecy that has fueled skepticism and conspiracy theories. One of the most enduring controversies surrounding the invasion is the true nature and extent of the threat posed by Grenada's government. The Reagan administration's claims that Grenada was on the verge of becoming a Soviet-Cuban military base have been disputed by some historians and analysts. They argue that the evidence presented by the U.S. government, particularly regarding the purpose of the new airport, was exaggerated and that the threat posed by Grenada was minimal. Furthermore, the secrecy surrounding the invasion, particularly the censorship of media coverage and the limited access to official documents, has raised suspicions about the U.S. government's motives. Critics have accused the Reagan administration of withholding information that contradicts its narrative and of using the invasion as a propaganda victory to bolster its image and advance its Cold War agenda. The lack of transparency surrounding the invasion has made it difficult to fully assess the validity of the U.S. government's claims and has contributed to the enduring controversy surrounding the event. The true motives and beneficiaries of the invasion remain a subject of debate, with some arguing that it was a necessary intervention to protect U.S. interests, while others view it as a blatant act of imperialism that violated international law and destabilized the region. The invasion of Grenada serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the complex and often unintended consequences of military intervention. More than 4 decades after the U.S. invasion of Grenada, the event continues to cast a long shadow over the island nation and its people. The invasion's legacy is a complex and multifaceted one, marked by both positive and negative consequences. On the one hand, the invasion led to the overthrow of a repressive military regime and paved the way for the restoration of democratic elections and a multi-party political system. Grenada has since held regular elections, and its citizens have enjoyed greater political freedoms and civil liberties than they did under the PRG and the RMC. The U.S. government, in the aftermath of the invasion, provided significant financial assistance to Grenada, aiding in its economic recovery and development. This assistance helped to rebuild infrastructure, improve healthcare and education systems, and boost the tourism industry, which has become a vital sector of Grenada's economy. However, the invasion also left lasting scars on Grenadian society. The trauma of the event, particularly the violence and loss of life, continues to resonate with many Grenadians. The invasion also exacerbated political divisions within the country, as some segments of the population remain sympathetic to the ideals of the revolution and critical of the U.S. intervention. The event highlighted the vulnerability of small states to intervention by powerful nations and fueled debates about the legitimacy of such interventions, even when conducted in the name of humanitarianism or democracy promotion.